Welcome back to our channel, wonderful viewers. Today is a beautiful day to dive deep into the heart of Port Charles. I have to admit, when the latest updates and spoilers concerning General Hospital started circulating, my heart skipped a beat. Seeing Kelly Thibault step back into the shoes of Britt Westbourne is always a monumental occasion for longtime fans like us. But the circumstances of her return are nothing short of catastrophic. Britt is being extradited back to Port Charles, and she is facing massive trouble for the kidnapping of Rocco Falconeri. For those of us who have followed Britt's tumultuous journey from her early days as the manipulative schemer to her evolution into a deeply sympathetic and complex heroine, this latest development feels like a sharp, painful regression. Kidnapping Dante and Lulu's son is a crime that carries heavy, emotional, and legal consequences in a town where family ties dictate every alliance and vendetta. I find myself wondering how Britt allowed herself to fall back into such a dark, desperate place. Was it desperation, or was she manipulated into committing this unthinkable act? My instinct tells me that Britt's actions are the result of a much larger, more sinister web of coercion, but regardless of the underlying reasons, the optics are terrible and the legal ramifications are severe. She is returning to a town that will offer her very little grace, and the person she will have to explain herself to the most is not the police, but her own mother, Liesl Obrecht. Kathleen Gotti's portrayal of Liesl Obrecht has always been a masterclass in balancing villainy with profound, fierce maternal love. Liesl is a woman who has committed unspeakable acts, yet her redeeming quality has always been her absolute, unwavering devotion to her children. Now, as Britt faces the music, the central question hovering over Port Charles is whether Liesl can ever forgive her daughter for the mountain of deception she has built. Britt has hidden secrets from her mother before, but the magnitude of the current lies is staggering and deeply destructive. As a longtime viewer, I have always cherished the complicated, deeply codependent, and yet genuinely loving dynamic between Liesl and Britt. They are survivors, women who have weathered the storms of being associated with César Faison. But this current rift feels fundamentally different. It is not just about a mistake, it is about a profound betrayal of trust. Liesl is a woman who demands absolute loyalty from her blood, and to realize that her own daughter has been keeping world-shattering secrets from her is a blow that strikes at the very core of Liesl's identity as a mother and a protector. The most agonizing and earth-shattering secret that Britt has kept from Liesl involves the very foundation of their family history. It is a secret so massive that it rewrites decades of Port Charles lore. Britt discovered that the man we all knew and loved as Nathan West was not actually Nathan. Instead, she learned from Cassius Faison that he is the twin brother who was presumed dead. The revelation that Madeline Reeves, Liesl's own sister, handed this child over to the monster that is César Faison is a twist that leaves me utterly breathless. Madeline's treachery has always been a known factor in General Hospital history, but the sheer cruelty of taking a child and giving him to a sociopath like Faison elevates her villainy to an entirely new level. Britt knew this. She knew that the man walking around was Cassius, the twin, and she chose to keep this monumental truth from her grieving mother. Why would Britt harbor such a toxic secret? I believe she thought she was protecting Liesl from a truth too painful to bear, but in the world of soap operas, the truth always claws its way to the surface, and the collateral damage of hiding it is always infinitely worse than the initial revelation. Imagine, for a moment, the psychological torment this inflicts upon Liesl. As viewers who have watched her weep over Nathan's grave, we know the depth of that maternal agony. Now, Liesl is forced to mourn the death of Nathan all over again, a fresh, raw wound ripped open by the revelation of his true identity and the existence of Cassius. She is trying to accept Cassius, trying to piece together the fractured remnants of her family, but the emotional whiplash is devastating. Kathleen Gatti is sure to deliver Emmy-worthy performances as Liesl grapples with this convoluted reality. She will undoubtedly confront her daughter, and we all know that when Liesl Obrecht demands answers, it is never a gentle conversation. She will demand to know the exact timeline of Britt's knowledge. She will want to know why her daughter looked her in the eye, watched her grieve, and said absolutely nothing. It is a betrayal that layers upon itself, creating a suffocating blanket of mistrust that threatens to choke whatever love remains between them. This situation represents a compounding of betrayals that is almost Shakespearean in its tragic scope. Liesl only learned of these horrors years after the fact. She is dealing with the posthumous betrayal of her sister, Madeline, to whom she had entrusted Nathan to protect him from Faison's corrupting influence. Madeline failed in the most spectacular and malicious way possible, but Madeline is gone. The anger Liesl feels toward her sister has nowhere to go. Therefore, all of that burning resentment, all of that profound hurt is redirected at the one person who is still here, the one person who knew the truth and stayed silent, Britt. For older viewers who understand the sacred bond of family, especially in the face of adversity, Britt's silence is incomprehensible. How do you justify hiding the existence of a sibling, the true fate of a son, from a mother who has already lost so much? You simply cannot, and Liesl is painfully aware of this inescapable fact. The upcoming confrontation between mother and daughter is poised to be one of the most explosive scenes in recent General Hospital history. We are told that Liesl cannot even bear to look at Britt, yet she is compelled to confront her. The act of omission, the conscious decision to withhold the truth, is in Liesl's eyes just as egregious as a blatant, malicious lie. When Liesl unloads her pain and a sense of ultimate betrayal onto Britt, I expect we will see a torrent of raw, unfiltered emotion. She will recount every tear shed, every sleepless night, every moment of despair, and lay it all at Britt's feet. Liesl will also bring up the agonizing period when Britt was presumed dead or missing. She will weep over the time Britt spent alive, secretly working at the Five Poppies, while her mother was left to mourn her. The cruelty of a child allowing a parent to believe they are dead is a recurring trope in daytime drama, but it never loses its emotional sting, especially when the characters involved have such a rich, complex, and deeply intertwined history. Britt's justification for her disappearance and her silence is tied to a dangerous web of blackmail. She was being coerced by Ross Cullum and Jen Sidwell to complete Caesar Faison's final, sinister project. While I understand that being blackmailed by ruthless men is a terrifying ordeal, I have to agree with Liesl's anticipated reaction. It is a remarkably poor excuse for letting your mother believe you are dead. Britt is not a fragile, helpless victim. She is a Westbourne. She is the daughter of Faison and Obrecht. She has navigated incredibly dangerous waters before. The idea that she was so paralyzed by Cullum and Sidwell that she could not find a single, secure way to send a message to her mother feels entirely out of character for the resourceful woman we have come to know. It feels like a convenient narrative device rather than an authentic character choice, and I am glad that the writers are having Liesl call out this logical fallacy with the ferocity it deserves. Let us look back at Britt's history, which we as longtime fans know intimately. This was not a situation where she was on the run from the World Security Bureau or the local police, hiding out in the remote corners of the globe like she did when she went on the run with her father, Caesar Faison, or later with Jason Morgan. When she fled with Jason, there was a palpable sense of immediate life-or-death urgency, a desperate flight from authorities that made communication impossible. But hiding at the Five Poppies, working on a project under duress, that is a different scenario entirely. Surely during all those months, there was an opportunity, a brief window to reach out to Liesl. A coded message, an anonymous burner phone call, a whisper through the underground networks that Liesl knows so well there were options. Britt chose not to take them, and that choice is what will haunt her relationship with her mother, perhaps for the rest of their lives. The tragedy of Britt's isolation is compounded by her medical struggles. During her time in hiding, Britt believed she was fighting a ticking biological clock, Huntington's disease. We are told she was receiving experimental drugs to treat the condition. As a viewer, Watching Britt face this terrifying diagnosis has always been heart-wrenching. It brought a profound vulnerability to her character. But the fact that she went through this experimental, undoubtedly grueling treatment process completely alone, without the fierce advocacy and comforting presence of her mother, a world-class medical professional herself, is deeply tragic. Why didn't she tell Liesl about the drugs? Liesl would have moved heaven and earth, crossed every ethical and legal boundary to ensure her daughter had the best possible care and a fighting chance at life. Britt denied Liesl the opportunity to be a mother when she needed one the most, and that is a wound that will not easily heal. However, the most sickening twist in this entire saga is the impending revelation that Britt was misdiagnosed from the very beginning. She never had Huntington's disease. When this truth comes to light, it will fundamentally alter the trajectory of Britt's life, offering her a future she thought was stolen from her. But how did this misdiagnosis happen? I strongly suspect, as the narrative hints, that it was not a simple medical error. It reeks of deliberate manipulation. It is highly probable that Ross Cullum planted someone in that clinic to falsify Britt's results, using the terror of a terminal illness to control her and force her compliance in finishing Faison's project. The sheer psychological torture of making a woman believe she is dying, a slow, degrading death, just to use her intellect, is a level of villainy that is truly despicable. It makes Britt a victim of a massive conspiracy, but it does not erase the choices she made while under that immense pressure. When we dig deeper into the lore of Port Charles, the connections become even more sinister. At the time of Britt's diagnosis and treatment, Victor Cassadine was heavily involved in running various clandestine medical clinics. We know from our long history with the show that where there is a Cassadine, there is corruption, manipulation, and a blatant disregard for human life. Furthermore, Heinrich Faison, better known to us as the despicable Peter August, was actively working with Victor. Given Peter's obsession with his family legacy and his penchant for torturing his relatives, it is entirely plausible that Cullum was also tied to this dark network. Was Britt's fake diagnosis orchestrated by Victor? Was Peter involved in ensuring his half-sister was kept on a tight leash? The interconnectedness of these villains highlights the inescapable shadow of Caesar Faison's legacy. Britt has spent her entire life trying to outrun her father's darkness, only to find herself manipulated by his acolytes and her own half-brother. The most heartbreaking aspect of this entire storyline is the deterioration of Liesl and Britt's relationship, culminating in Liesl blaming Britt for the death of Cassius. When a mother loses a child, the grief can mutate into a desperate need for a scapegoat, and tragically, Liesl is directing that venom at Britt. Liesl believes that Britt's secrets, her involvement with Cullum, and her failure to expose the truth directly led to the circumstances of Cassius's demise. This accusation is the ultimate breaking point. It is pushing Liesl into a new, terrifying era of darkness. We have seen Liesl do terrible things in the name of love, but what will she do in the name of vengeance and misplaced blame against her own daughter? This internal family warfare is proving that Liesl is facing a profound psychological crisis, unable to cope with the compounding tragedies of her life without destroying the one person she has left,